Welcome back, Defenders. Happy Holy Military Parade Day, or whatever the Russians call it. Russia holds 80th Anniversary Victory Day Parade on Red Square. This is not the anniversary the entire world should be paying attention to. The rest of the world should never forget this. Russia enters the war by invading Poland. Russians formally joined forces with the Nazis. This was September of 1939 that Russia and the Nazis started World War II. They did this with a secret agreement to invade and divide up Poland. And I want to remind everyone that when World War II was over, Russia never gave this territory back to Poland. This part of what was Poland in 1939 was given to Belarus, and this portion was given to Soviet Ukraine. But for the people of Eastern and Central Europe, this was not a victory. This was not a liberation. The people of Eastern and Central Europe went from being brutalized and occupied by the Germans to being brutalized and occupied by the Russians. But they're having a parade. You know why. So let's check in and let me show you just a little bit of this parade in Moscow.
Мимо трибун проходят знаменные группы с государственным флагом Российской Федерации, знаменем Победы и знаменем Вооруженных сил России. Знаменные группы сопровождает почетный караул, открывает прохождение техники легендарный танк Великой Отечественной войны Т-34 под боевым знаменем Первой гвардейской краснознаменной танковой армии.
AI is pretty wild, guys. We're going to be seeing a lot more of this in the future of just complete nonsense on social media. But here's the real parade. If you want to watch it for yourself, I'll link it down below. This was the Telegraph's full coverage. And nothing crazy happened. There were no major disruptions. There was no attack. There were no explosions. As far as I know, nobody died. So it was a routine parade. But I want to show you a clip because these May 9th Victory Day parades actually occur in dozens of cities across Russia. And they're not all as glamorous as the one in Red Square. So here is the May 9th parade in Norilsk. Nailed it. Putin greets North Korean officers after May 9th military parade. The Russians and the North Koreans are no longer pretending. They're not going to pretend like North Korea is not directly involved in this war. North Koreans are now fighting on the territory of Ukraine for the Russians. This is now publicly acknowledged by the Russian Ministry of Defense and North Korea's government. So this is the new normal. And here is Putin embracing a North Korean general, thanking the Koreans for being the savior of Russia in this war. Russia would not be doing as well on the battlefield without the millions of artillery shells and the hundreds or thousands of rockets being supplied by Kim Jong-un.
대통령님 높은 평가에 하의를 표합니다. 조선인민군 제 총참모부 부총장경 경찰총장 장장 이상호 안녕하십니까. 당신을 만나뵙게 돼서 영광입니다.
Manasa Pangapsimnida. It's an honor to meet you. And if there's any military in the world more pathetic than the Russians, it's the North Koreans. Look at all these stupid medals. And the reason why their chest is covered in medals is because in North Korea, they have a 3-generation inheritance policy for military commendations. So every North Korean soldier gets to wear the medals that his father and 2 grandfathers earned in the North Korean military. So these generals are not special. They're just the grandchildren of generals in North Korea. It's based on blood lineage, not merit or skill. None of these North Korean generals have ever seen combat or led troops in combat. But they get a special position of honor at the May 9th parade in Moscow. China sends ceremonial detachment to join Russia's Victory Day parade. These are all of the countries that sent like a military parade group to join in the parade. Most of these are from the Central Asian countries, but we've also got Vietnam, Egypt, Mongolia, of course Belarus. So let me play for you a little bit of the Chinese military marching through Red Square.
Почетного караула Народно-освободительной армии Китайской Народной Республики возглавляет парадный строй старший полковник Чжу Вэймин.
Dictators love their military parades. And every time Putin and Xi get together, this is what they do. This is the entrance ceremony, and it's pretty absurd, so let me share this with you guys. The Emperor of China meeting with the Tsar of Russia. This is how these two men view themselves now. And we're watching history in the making, guys. These two men are in complete control of their countries. There are no checks and balances. They are dictators for life, and they both have set their countries on this path of war. Both of these men are going to start more wars over the next 10 or 20 years. And they're going to kill a lot of people. It's up to the rest of the world what we want to do about these two men and their territorial ambitions. Russia and China declare a joint front against the United States as Xi wants an end to external interference in Moscow. Xi doesn't care about external influence in Moscow. He wants the United States to completely abandon Taiwan. Don't do anything. Once China makes their move on Taiwan, probably in the next 2 years. Xi got the seat of honor at the parade, sitting next to Putin the entire time. And this just shows you how important China is to Russia, how dependent Russia is on China. Lula of Brazil was there, Lukashenko was there, other heads of state, but Xi got the position because Xi is the most important. Xi's presence at Moscow's parade shows that China wants to keep Russia in its orbit, and Trump's dream of playing a reverse Nixon, tearing Russia away from China, is an illusion. If the United States sees China as a threat, it should see Russia as a threat too, and therefore support Ukraine. If the United States supports Ukraine, and we weaken or defeat Russia, this weakens the Chinese. If in fact the United States, anyone in our government, actually views the Chinese as a threat. Concerning this relationship, this is not an equal partnership. Putin likes to pretend like it's an equal partnership, and maybe 4 years ago it was an equal partnership. But the economy of China is 10 times larger than Russia. The population of China is 10 times larger than Russia. And Xi is just humoring Putin. He's playing with them. The Chinese don't really care about the Russians or what happens in this war. If there is political instability in Russia, maybe in 5 or 10 years, China will just exploit it. The Russians have space and the Russians have natural resources, two things the Chinese want, so China is keeping the Russians and Putin close, but ideologically they're not really that aligned with each other than they present opposition to the free and democratic world. Any people living free anywhere is a threat to a dictator's power at home. So the Chinese and the Russians don't like it when other nations have free and fair elections, because that gives their own people bad ideas. Evil cannot be appeased. Zelensky urges unity against Russia on World War II anniversary. Zelensky yesterday put out a fantastic video in which he's just walking through the streets of Kyiv. He's still being protected, he still has the security detail, but he wanted to film this video showing that he's not afraid and showing that life in the capital city of Kyiv does still endure, does still continue. I'll link the video down below if you want to read the subtitles. Once again, this is Zelensky for 8 minutes just walking through the capital city of Kyiv, not afraid of snipers on the roof, not afraid of being assaulted by people on the street. This is something that Vladimir Putin would never do. You would never see Vladimir Putin walking through the streets of Moscow filming a selfie video. Here are the comments from Zelensky on the anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe. In attempting to appropriate Ukraine, Russia is appropriating another nation's memory and distorted history. That is why not only today, on the day of remembrance and victory over Nazism, but always, it is worth remembering Ukrainians made their great contribution to that victory. They stopped a global evil with their own blood. American historian Timothy Snider, Ukraine, not Russia, bore heaviest civilian toll in World War II. I'm going to play the first minutes of this clip of Yale historian Timothy Snider talking about the tragedy and the sacrifice that Ukraine made during World War II.
But it's worth being specific here about the difference between Ukraine and the rest of the Soviet Union for two reasons. The first is Ukraine was the major war aim. Ukraine was the center of Hitler's ideological colonialism. But beyond that, in practice, all of Soviet Ukraine was occupied for most of the war, which is why for Ukrainians today, war is something that happens here as opposed to elsewhere. Hitler never planned to conquer any more than 10% of Soviet Russia. And in practice, German armies never occupied more than 5% of Soviet Russia, and that for a relatively brief period of time. Now, Russians suffered in the Second World War in a way that is unthinkable to West Europeans, in a way that is unthinkable even for Germans. But nevertheless, when we think about the Soviet Union, the place of the Soviet Ukraine is very special, even by comparison to Soviet Russia.
No more than 5% of Soviet Russia was ever occupied by the Nazis, and it wasn't occupied for that long. But 100% of Soviet Ukraine was occupied for a full 2 years. They suffered under the Nazis for 2 years. 6 to 7 million Ukrainians served in the Red Army. Over 300 became generals. They received 30% of all Soviet military awards. But the people of Ukraine during World War II, they lost 10 million people. 1 to 1.5 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. Millions died as civilians in forced labor camps. Russia had only 3% of its territory ever occupied. But Russia claims the suffering that the Soviet Union endured exclusively belongs to Russia, and they're using the memory of World War II as a weapon against Ukraine, discounting Ukraine's sacrifice and their bravery during World War II. Ukraine suffered more under the Nazis than the Russians ever did, and the Russians will never acknowledge this, because they've stolen the tragedy of World War II for themselves. They want the memory, the victory, exclusively for themselves, while going to war to destroy Ukraine, in the same way that the Nazis did. Pro-Russian communists unveil first Stalin monument in occupied Ukraine. This is the city of Melitopol. This is in Zaporizhia. And the Russians are now putting up monuments to Stalin in the occupied territories, when Stalin, especially in the 1930s, deliberately killed millions of Ukrainians, depopulate the land, and then move in proper Russians loyal to Stalin. I don't know, guys. I don't know how this part of the world is ever going to get past this. It's going to take a very long time. Historic decision. Ukraine's parliament ratifies mineral deal with the United States. It was unanimously approved by Ukraine's parliament. This is the Rada. 338 and 0 against. I know people are, rightfully so, suspicious, skeptical, upset with the United States. But this deal on its own merits is actually decent, and Ukraine retains final approval and final control over everything. So if Ukraine does not want to partner with the United States or really continue this deal at all, they can halt the fund and they can stop participating. So there really is no downside. There's no way for Donald Trump or the United States in the future to abuse or hijack the fund. So yes, it got unanimous approval, and I genuinely hope this is a mutually beneficial deal going decades into the future. Donald Trump is not going to be president forever. Somebody will come after him, and hopefully this deal can endure and benefit both nations going forward. Here are the comments from President Zelensky after the parliament ratified it. I am grateful to everyone on our team who worked on the economic partnership agreements with the United States, and to everyone who supported it. I thank all 338 members of Parliament who voted in favor of the agreement. I expect the ratification law to be submitted from the Rada to my office soon. Once the legal procedures are complete, we will be able to begin establishing the fund. I know for everyone who's not American, you're pretty sick of Donald Trump, you're pretty sick of the United States. So am I, to a certain degree. But Zelensky is correct. The world needs America, Zelensky says in call with Trump, and says he is ready for a total ceasefire. The United States being the world's largest economy and the most advanced military, Zelensky has no choice. He must keep engaging with Donald Trump. He must keep trying to reach Donald Trump. Zelensky and Trump discuss a ceasefire and pressure on the Russians in a phone call. President Zelensky is now having regular communications with Donald Trump. This is kind of unimaginable given that disastrous meeting in the White House more than a month ago. But here is what Zelensky is saying about his conversation with Trump. I had a good conversation with President Trump. We congratulated our nations on victory in Europe Day, the victory over Nazism. We welcomed the Ukrainian parliament's ratification of the Economic Partnership Agreement, a truly historic document that opens up many new opportunities for cooperation. He then talks about the need for a 30-day ceasefire, which Russia won't agree to. President Trump confirmed that he wants this war to end, is ready to help, and supports the need for a ceasefire. We agreed on our further future contacts. Trump also said some nice things about Zelensky. I'll link this clip down below if you want to listen to it. But this is progress. He's not calling Zelensky a dictator. He's not blaming Ukraine for starting this war. He's not demanding that Ukraine pay the United States back $500 billion. It's been a roller coaster the last 100 days, but we are making progress. The United States is ready to walk away if Russia negotiates in bad faith. This is according to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance himself is pretty pro-Russian based on his comments during the campaign. But yes, J.D. Vance and the Russia faction of my government, they're frustrated that the Russians won't accept any deal on any terms. They want to continue the war. They want to expand the war. They want to start new wars. And I don't know if Donald Trump was like delusional enough to believe that Russia wanted to stop for some reason. Like I am genuinely shocked and confused that these idiots in my government are shocked and confused that Russia doesn't want to stop the war. This is the problem when you start believing your own propaganda. Putin's a war criminal. Trump's Treasury Secretary Bessent tells Congress. This is once again a sign of progress. Members of Trump's government are now calling Putin a war criminal. I don't think they would have done that 2 or 3 weeks ago, but this is the Treasury Secretary stating a fact. And I'm going to play this clip for you.
For asking the question about Russia, do you consider Vladimir Putin a war criminal?
Yes.
Would you negotiate with a war criminal?
I think that's the nature of diplomacy. One must negotiate with both sides, sir.
So you will be negotiating then with a war criminal?
I believe that negotiation that was needed with the Japanese after World War II.
Okay.
I am going to say something shocking, but Trump is correct. At some point, there probably will have to be a negotiation with Putin to end the war, in some way. Ideally, Russia has been severely weakened. There's turmoil inside of Russia. But we can't plan for Putin being assassinated or the Russian people rising up and setting fire to the Kremlin. So at some point in the future, things are going to have to get worse for Russia, but there will be some kind of negotiation. Maybe not with Putin, maybe Putin is gone, but whoever replaces him will probably also be, by definition, a war criminal, and we're going to have to talk to that person to make the fighting stop, and ideally, get the Russians to withdraw from Ukraine's sovereign territory. They're coming around. The people in my government, they're coming around. And it's because the Ukrainians are relentless. The Ukrainians will not give up on the Trump administration, and they won't disengage. They're going to continue talking to them. Yermak met online with Keith Kellogg and Witkoff to discuss future pressure on Russia. Chief Rabbi of Ukraine meets with Witkoff. U.S. lawmakers, the Heritage Foundation, calls for continued Ukraine support. I want to give a shout out to the Chief Rabbi, Osman. He speaks fluent English and puts out really nice videos on social media. And he did have a son who was killed by the Russians fighting in this war, so his own family has experienced the tragedy. And he has been relentless. I follow this guy on Twitter, and he's got the energy and the stamina, and he's been meeting with a lot of people, trying to convince them to publicly support Ukraine, publicly condemn what the Russians are doing. And because the Trump administration is so pro-Israel, given that he's Jewish, he will get access. People will take these meetings, they will speak with him. He has been a very powerful advocate for Ukraine. This is the rabbi meeting with the Heritage Foundation. This is a conservative think tank, telling them the Russians are not our friends. We should be supporting Ukraine. Here's the rabbi meeting with Steve Witkoff, who's also Jewish, and this guy definitely needs some better information because at the moment he only speaks with the Russians and Vladimir Putin. I also want to show this picture. This is pretty alarming. This is Speaker Johnson standing next to a Iranian Shahed drone. I'm not entirely sure if this drone was captured, it was an Iranian drone launched in Israel or a Russian drone launched at Ukraine. But I do think members of Congress want to act. I think there are supermajorities in both the House and the Senate that will pass tougher sanctions on Russia if Trump says it's okay. We might have to wait another month or two for Trump to come around to that position, but this is what our allies want. This is what the G7, this is what NATO is telling Donald Trump every day. We are your friends. We are your allies. We are your trading partners, not the Russians. The Russians are on the side of the Chinese. This was never going to work. This is shocking. For the first time, Ukrainian intelligence exposes Hungarian intelligence agents who were spying against Ukraine. Ukrainian counterintelligence detained 2 people in Zakarpattia who allegedly collected military intelligence for Hungary, including how locals would react if Hungarian troops invaded Ukraine. There is a video of the two men being apprehended. I'll link it down below. But these men were in Ukraine spying for Hungary in the event that Hungary's military would enter Ukraine. Zakarpattia is located right here. Historically, this territory once belonged to Hungary. It now belongs to Ukraine. There are a minority of Hungarian-speaking people in this province, and dictators can't help themselves. Viktor Orban can't help himself. Like, this is just what every dictator does. They look at their neighbor's territory and they say, wouldn't it be great if I was in charge of that? So this is mildly concerning, but not too concerning. Like, the government in Kyiv would have to collapse first before Hungary would try and send in peacekeepers to stabilize this region. But this isn't going to happen. This is incredibly stupid. Honestly, everyone in the EU should be doing something about Viktor Orban in Hungary. He's a Russian agent. Plain and simple. He shouldn't be in NATO and he shouldn't be in the EU at all. Let's get to the good news. EU sends Ukraine 1.1 billion covered by interest from frozen Russian assets. This is the next tranche being delivered. Interest from frozen Russian assets. So Russian money is being used to defeat Russia. Germany announced another security assistance package. It's the usual stuff in here. Thank you so much to the Germans. Japan provides infrastructure inspection equipment to Ukraine. Stuff is stuff. Thank you so much to the Japanese. Final clip I want to play for you guys is another POW video. This is 21-year-old Dennis being released from Russian captivity. And he sings, I think it's In the Field, Red Vibranium, or I don't know exactly the title of the song. In the Meadows, Red Vibranium, it's a flower. But this man probably just spent years in Russian captivity, and the Russians failed to break his spirit. This is how he looks and sounds on his way home.
Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну гей-гей розвеселимо.
He's got a good voice. Okay, I looked it up. The title in English is Oh, the Red Viburnum in the Meadow. It's a good song. Okay guys, that's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.